I do always record the session, so this is now being recorded. And today is kind of the introductory session. And the purpose of these sessions is not for me to teach you all of the material. It would be impossible for me to teach you everything you need for this course in just an hour a week. So this is kind of, I hit the highlights, I make sure you have all your questions answered, and we talk about the big highlights, but you are still expected to watch the videos and things on your own. So I will be going through the course itself a little bit. If you've watched the Ivy Learn walkthrough, you probably are already aware of a lot of things, but I want to make sure you have that taken care of. So one thing first, I like to have a face to go with the name. So let's see how this camera works. My computer just got worked on. Ah, there I am. So I'm Becky. Hello, and this is my office. I like to have, there's that shoulder, stitch over my shoulder. I've got a zebra up here. So I come live from my office every week, and this is where I'll be teaching. So you can kind of picture me here. This is what I'll be doing. It's kind of odd just talking to a computer for an hour, but I do it twice a week, so it works. I don't like to have the video on. One, it distracts me because I'm looking at myself, and two, it uses a lot of the bandwidth or something. I'm not exactly sure, but I like that you have a face to go with the name. So this is me. This is what I look like. If you're ever on the Warsaw campus and you want to stop by, I'm down in the faculty offices in 109. It's behind a locked door. There's a phone on the wall. You just pick it up. The phone number's next to it. Call me. I'll come and get you. You can come hang out with me. So I'm turning the video off. See ya. Okay, so no more video. So this class, so basically what it's going to go through is we're going to base it off of PowerPoint. Every week I have a PowerPoint that's kind of already set up, and we work through it. And I will ask you questions, and I respond as much as possible. If you don't know, that's okay. But you can talk, right? Just unmute yourself and talk. You can type in the chat box. You can take control. You should have control of the marker if you just want to pick it up. But I want to talk about mainly this week of the important pieces. We will do a little bit of math today, but not a ton. Majority of the math this week you're going to have to do on your own, and this is an online class and to an extent, so you are going to be expected to take care of those things. So this is kind of the big piece here. We're going to go through Ivy Learn, right? The first 5 or 6 pieces are basically Ivy Learn, and then 7 and 8 are what we're going to do this week. So I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint and I'm going to open up Ivy Learn. So I am now in Ivy Learn in our class, our 41B, under the syllabus button. And thank you, Amy just got on, but thank you to Amy who emailed me and said, your syllabus is not updated. I totally missed that earlier, but taken care of now. So you can see all of my information there. I am not going to go through the syllabus. You can read, so that is up to you. But I want to point out, this phone number goes to my office number. Feel free to call me and leave me a message. Feel free to email me. I get those things no matter where I am. So please feel free to give me that information. Rebecca Fott is my supervisor. If you have any questions or concerns about me, please go to her if you do not feel comfortable talking to me. You can see the weights. This class is weighted on the side here, and those are correct. What I really like about the syllabus, you should read the whole thing, but at the very bottom we have a course summary. So you can see that on Monday to September 25th, which is in 6 days, you have 4 things that are due. Now technically, and actually it's 5, because we do have a first discussion board. I'm not sure why that's not showing up. I will get that due date in there. But the orientation for web work is not for a grade. If you do it, you do. If you don't, you don't. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. But this has a breakdown of when everything is due in this class. So if you're not sure about due dates, you can always check there. You can also check due dates under the calendar button. If you haven't fully utilized the calendar button in Ivy Learn, you are missing out. So I'm currently teaching 7 classes, with this one being one of them. And you can see that every class has a color. So this today is the 19th. So you can see that whoever's purple, which is section 20B, they have 2 things due today. Green has 2 things due today, and pink has 1. So it's all over. Different colors have different things, right? Look, you guys are orange or rust or whatever, and all of your stuff is due on the 25th. So you can also see the due dates, and you can also, if you're like, I need to take that quiz from the calendar, you can just click on the quiz, click on the title of it, and it will take you directly to the quiz, and then you would take it. Right? Looks a little different because I'm the instructor, but that's kind of the basics of it. All right, so there's the syllabus. I think the announcements might actually be the most important part of this class for you. I utilize announcements a lot, a lot, a lot. Feel free, right? People that are here, Amy, Christian, Kara, interrupt me anytime you guys have a question. This is where I will post all of the videos. So like your intro videos that I asked you to watch are posted here. If you haven't watched them yet, you're going to want to do that. After this class is over, I will, session is being recorded. I will then post an announcement that says live session 919 video. Anytime I post a video, I put that in the heading. So you really, really, really pay attention to the announcements, because anything that is important, that's how I communicate it, because it's always there. You can always go back and find it. Now, one thing about this spreadsheet with videos that I just posted, I think I posted this yesterday. This is an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to open it up and talk about it because I think it's so important. This spreadsheet has every video that goes with your book that you have, that you got in the mail. So we are going to start in Unit 1, and this week we are doing sections 1, 2, and 3. So you can see here sections 1, 2, and 3. These are all the videos that go with your book and the time that it takes to go through each video. So you can see you can watch all of these videos in what, hour and 20 minutes maybe, and you have all 3 sections, all the information. They go through all of the pages and do all of the problems with you. So you can utilize these in any way you want. But when I get questions via email, and I encourage that, I encourage questions, but depending on what the question is, sometimes I can tell that you haven't watched the videos. So sometimes my answer will be watch the videos and then ask me a question if you still have it. Because usually if you do your due diligence with these videos, you will probably have less questions. You're still going to have questions, but you probably will have less. One of the big ones in section 2 that everybody has questions about is age dependency ratios, and we will talk about those today. But it is important that you notice there is a video that only talks about the age dependency ratios, and you're going to need that video probably because those are a little bit interesting. But anyway, the back of your packet, it's separated by a blue piece of paper, goes to extra sections. So you can see all of these videos are extra practice in sections 1, 2, and 3. So if you need extra practice, go to the back of your packet for whatever reason, and you don't have to watch them all, but you can watch some of them depending on what you need. There it is. Okay, so that's that spreadsheet. I recommend saving that to your desktop so you constantly have easy access to it. Okay, so I wanted to hit that. What else did I want to talk about? I talked about the resources, web work. Okay, so you're going to do all of your homework in web work. You can only get to that through this button on the left. I'm not going to talk about web work. This is the only thing I want to say. You go here, it brings it up to a new spot. You click on it here. From there, if you have not watched the web work walkthrough video in that first announcement, do that. That is a fantastic video. It's not very long, and it will get you where you need to go in terms of this web work, okay, and using it. Web work is where we do all of our online homework, so you need to know how to do that. But watch that video. It explains everything, and it's so much easier than me talking about it. All right. So the modules are fabulous. I only say that because I made them. So you can see here we have some resources. Feel free to look through those. So because this is a 12-week class, we're not going to do like module 1 today and module 2 next week. We're going to do like 1.5 here for a while because we have 12 weeks. But you can kind of see where everything is located. So you can make sure you don't miss anything. You can see we have web work orientation. Kara, there are tabs at the bottom. When you open it up, it opens up into Unit 3. So the tabs at the bottom, you can click. They're separated by unit. There you go. Yep, you're welcome. And so this just kind of keeps you on pace of what you need. So like here, web work orientation, web work 2, quiz 1, discussion board. And we're getting into section 3 this week. So in this live session, I will always remind you at the end what is due by next week, but you also have that calendar to keep you on track. So the modules are just, they're here, but this is how you can get into your quiz also, or the discussion board. Click on it. Oh, it doesn't have a due date set. But then you can get in there. The discussion boards should always be done after you watch the live session. So you 3 that are here today, as soon as we are done with the live session, you can totally go into the discussion board and get it out. The discussion boards are really a reflection of this synchronous piece. So for all the people who are not here live but are going to watch this later, watch it, then you do your discussion board. So make sure you kind of get all of that going at the same time, because that's crucial. And don't forget those. Those are easy points, and we want to make sure we get whatever easy points we can. All right, so proctored exams. You have 3 exams in this class. So let me go to a pen with a fun color. Proctored exams, there are 3. All 3 of them must be done at at a proctored location. If you do an Ivy Tech location, it's the easiest. If you can't get to an Ivy Tech location, or that doesn't work for you, you need to email me about that as soon as possible, because we're going to need to do some figuring out of where you can take your exams. You can take them through ProctorU, which means you can take them at home through your computer, but you must have a webcam, and it will cost you, I think it's either $20 or $25 per exam. And that's payable to ProctorU. That's not an Ivy Tech cost. That is a ProctorU cost for using an outside service. So really, if you can go to an Ivy Tech location, that's really the best. So if you can't, I need to know that as soon as possible. And I will let you know when the exams are coming and all of that. Expectations. This class is easy to pass. If you do all of the work, you will pass. If you don't do the work, you will fail. It is really that simple. I didn't say the math is easy. And then not all of it is. Some of it you're going to find easy, I hope. But some of the math may be difficult. But if you're willing to put the time in, do the work, and complete the assignments, you will do well. It is the people who take shortcuts and who don't do things, those are the people who are not successful. So my expectation for you is that you're going to actually either show up for the live session or watch it later, and you're going to do the assignments that I ask you to do. Your expectations of me: I'm going to respond to your emails in a timely manner. I'm going to grade your stuff when it comes in, and I'm going to be here to help you in any way I can. Now, 2 to 3 on Tuesdays is not always going to be fabulous for all of us, including me. I think I'm going to be going in 2 weeks. We'll talk about that next week. So if you need extra help and we need to talk about something and it's not going to fit into 2 to 3, feel free to say, hey, Becky, can we have a live session on Wednesday night at 7? If I don't have other plans already scheduled, I have no problem creating a live session on Wednesday night at 7 for questions, because I can do this from anywhere. I can do this at home, sitting in front of my TV. You just have to ask, right? If you are willing to work, I am willing to bust my butt to help you, because I think that is my job, right? So if you need extra help, you just have to reach out. 2 semesters ago, I had an extra session almost every week, and it was usually only one student that showed up because she wanted extra help. And if she was willing to put the work in, I was willing to put the work in. So if you ask for a session, I always open it up to everybody, but not every, you don't have to come. Those extra sessions are simply whatever you need. So you just have to ask. You just have to ask. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I think we're ready to get into this week. So let's go back to the slideshow. I don't know why that does that. Last class I had, they actually said they liked the black background better. They thought it was easier to see. I don't know if that's true or not, but we shall see. Okay, so for this week, we're going to do 3 sections. There we go. So 3 sections. So in web work, you have the orientation sections 2 and 3. Only 2 and 3 are graded. By the way, my handwriting is horrible. It's a little worse than normal right there, but it's bad. So those 2 are graded. The orientation is just, if you've never used web work, you're going to want to at least look through it, okay? Because you've never used it. You just kind of want to see what this program is about. If you've already used it at some point, great. Jump into 2 and 3 and we'll go from there. Again, watch the web work video first. You have a discussion board to do, and you have a quiz. All of those are due on 9/25, which is in 6 days. So you don't want to dilly-dally, right? You want to make sure you're getting after it and getting started. If you have questions, give them to me. I have a lot going on, a lot of different pieces here and there, and I will be in Texas for a few days at the end of the week in some training, but I will be checking email periodically. So if you have questions, you get them to me, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, and you can email me either straight through Ivy Tech email, or you can do it through Ivy Learn. There is that inbox feature. Either one works. I will get back to you no matter which way you do it. So this is what's due this week. All right. Now, section 1 You'll notice there is no section 1 homework because section 1 is kind of just the introduction. What is quantitative reasoning? I like to just call it, get back on the math horse. Quantitative reasoning, it sounds so hard, and I love telling people what I teach because they think I'm this just rocket scientist. But really, quantity just means numbers. So quantitative is numbers. In reasoning, well, there's a lot of different things, but I like to say reasoning is kind of like thinking. So basically, this whole class is thinking about numbers is what we're doing. Now, we will be doing some math, and we're going to talk about math, but quantitative reasoning is really thinking about what your answers mean. And you're going to hear me say a lot, we're going to write meaningful sentences. That simply means instead of just saying the answer is 4 and circling the 4, you're going to tell me what that 4 represents. So that 4 is how many turkeys I have living in my basement. Or that 4 is how many iPads I own, or that 4 is how many chapsticks I carry in my pocket at one time, right? It could be anything. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to really think about what your answers mean, and that's key to this course. Okay, so section 1 also kind of gets into graphs, and this is where you're going to start discussing. So there's only 3 of you in here, and that's fine. But how many different types of graphs can you think of? Just name them. What kind of graphs? And you can either do it verbally, because you can unmute yourself and talk, or you can type in the chat box. How many different types of graphs can we come up with? That's the question. Different types of graphs. There's a bar graph. So bar, pie, line. Any more? Those are the big ones. Those are definitely the big ones. There are others, and there's all kinds of different types of graphs. And now, bar graphs, there are like 3 different types of bar graphs, right, that have different meanings. And we're going to, as you watch and work through the packet, you will see these graphs come up. It is important as humans that we can read graphs and we can talk about graphs. We're not going to do a whole lot of that in this session or in our lifetime. But in the packet, the graphs pop up all the time. And so as you're watching those videos and working through the packet, the information on your own, you're going to see those things come up, and pay attention to those. It's usually where I start saying, details matter. That's kind of my saying, because as you're working through these things, if you don't notice the small details, you're screwed. You know what I'm saying? You got to know what the title is. You got to know what the information is. All of these different pieces about the graphs, they're super important. So it's going to be important that you pay attention to the details. Okay, good. Good. And now you guys see how easy it is to participate in this class. Hey, that's section 1. All right, so section 2, and obviously there's more to section 1 than that, those 2 things, but that's where it comes in on your end where you watch those videos, right? This 1-hour session is a highlight, and hi, Gabrielle, welcome to the party, and it's for questions. So if you guys watch the videos that go with the sections before you come to class and then to the live session and you have questions, we'll do questions first. So we can do an hour worth of questions and never get to a single slide. Up to you entirely, right? This is for whatever you need. Okay, section 2, ratios. Tell me everything you know about ratios. If you know anything about ratios. Maybe you don't. If you don't, that's okay. That's why we're here. Anybody know how we can write ratios? I bet you do. Once we talk about it, you're going to go, oh yeah, I remember that. All right, so ratios can be written a couple of different ways. And you know what? I'm kind of sick of red, so I'm going to change colors. So we can write ratios. Let's use 2 to 3. So one way we can write a ratio is using the word 2. And that's all fine and dandy, but it's hard to do math when you have words in there. You also can write it using a colon, 2:3. Or my favorite is a fraction. And my favorite is a fraction, not because I like fractions, although I have nothing against fractions, but because fractions are the easiest to play with. So you can see this. From fractions, we can change that to a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and round that. And from a decimal, I can go to a percent. So it's kind of nice that if we write a ratio as a fraction, we can then change it to be all kinds of different ways. And depending on what we're trying to do, well, that's going to depend on what form you want your ratio in. So it's going to be kind of important that you pay attention to that. I recommend writing your ratio as a fraction, and you'll see why as you kind of start working through the sections. If you are not comfortable going from a fraction to a decimal to a percent, there is a video that goes, I think it's either in section 1 or 2, and it works on that. Highly recommend you work through that stuff. If it's been a while, you're going to want to refresh because you're going to need that. We are going to play with fractions a lot in here, and you really need to be comfortable doing that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. I want you guys to try this. We want to write a ratio showing 16 to 24. I want you to write it as a fraction, change it to a decimal, and then change it to a percent. So do that. When you're done, just type yes in the chat box, and then we'll move on. And if you get stuck, just type no in the chat box, and then we'll do it all together. Nothing wrong with that either. Okay, we got a couple of yeses. All right, so either Amy or Christian or Kara, can any of you give me the fraction? And the worst thing that happens here is that we fix something that's wrong. There's no problem. 2/3. Oh, yeah. Amy, yeah, okay, good. And I like that Kara did both of them. So when you first get this problem, you've got 16 over 24. Hopefully you notice they are both reducible by 8. So we do reduce that to 2/3. Mathematical rule, if you have a fraction and it can be reduced, you need to reduce it. So 2/3 is the answer. I should have picked a different ratio for the one before that because I just gave you all the answers. Decimal. So what is 2/3 as a decimal? 0.667. Yep. Don't ask me what that was. So there's our decimal. And then as a percent, 66.7%. Yeah, same thing I just talked about. Obviously, not good planning on my part, but that happens. All right, so being able to go from, right, divide top by bottom. So if you take 2 divided by 3, that gives us the decimal. Decimal to a percent, we multiply by 100%, and that's what gets us the percent. Okay, great. Basic playing with ratios. Now, there's a lot of words on this. Don't let that get to you. So when we have a ratio, it can be one of two things. It can be part to part or part to whole. And if you think about what the ratio represents, this isn't too horrible. So when I talk about, there are 35 students in this class, right? This 35 represents all my students. 14 are female. Well, my female is part of my class, and the males are part of my class. Think logically, right? The males and females are both part of the class. All of them are the whole thing. So when I'm looking at letter A, what is the ratio of males to the whole class? Well, males comes first, so the males are on top. That's 21. Whole class comes second, so that goes on the bottom. So it's very much order specific. Whatever comes first has to go on the top. So when I reduce, right, both of these are reduced by 7, reducible by 7, so I end up with 3/5. This is my ratio of males to the whole class. Now, is that part to part or part to whole? What do you think? part to whole. And that is absolutely correct because the bottom, the denominator represents everybody. And it says whole class, right? So this is part to whole. Now, the beautiful thing about part to whole ratios is that you can write them as percents. So if I change 3/5 to a percent, well, that's 0.6 as a decimal, and that's 60% as a percent. So our meaningful sentence, 60% of students are male. And yes, I abbreviated because you try writing with a mouse, right? So 60% of students are male. I love part to whole ratios because you can write them as percents, and they're a whole lot easier than part to part ratios. Okay. Anybody have any questions on how we did that or why I did that? Stop me if you do. Okay, then we go to letter B, which says, what is the ratio of females to males? Well, females comes first, so the females go on the top. Males come second, so males on the bottom. Again, both of these numbers are reducible by 7, so I end up with our favorite fraction of the day, 2/3. Is this part to part or part to whole? Part to part, exactly, because both males and females are part of the class. Well, part to part ratio, they are written as decimals. You can keep them as fractions, but you can only change them as far as decimals. So we can say 0.667. Now, you can change any number to a fraction by putting it over 1. So we would call this, maybe a simplification of our fraction from 2/3 to 0.667 over 1. And if you had a bigger fraction, 30,000 over 32,000, something like that, it might be a little easier to think about going to a fraction to make it simpler. But what it means, right? So remember, the top number represents females and the bottom number represents males. So when I'm looking at my smaller reduced fraction, my meaningful sentence could say, for every, my numerator is 0.667 females, there is 1 male. You've heard people say it's a 2-to-1 ratio, males to females, that kind of thing. Well, this is how they do that. That doesn't mean there were only 3 people in the room. That means when they took that fraction and reduced it, it reduced down to 2-to-1. This case, it's 0.667 over 1. So there's a lot of reducing ratios that comes into play here of how this all works. All right. And remember, whole lot more examples in your packet. None of the examples we do in this live session will be in your packet. Everything in your packet is on its own. All right, so age dependency ratios. I promised that we were going to do an example like this. So age dependency ratios basically are talking about who's dependent on who in order to survive. And we're talking about economy. So child dependency, it's all about children. Children are 0 to 14 in age, right? So these are the children, 0 to 14, and we compare them to workers. The working class is aged 15 to 64. These are the workers. So if I take all of our children from 0 to 14 and I divide it by the workers, 15 to 64, that gives me the child dependency ratio. And we will actually do an example in the next slide with the numbers and how this all works and what do the sentences look like, because you're going to need to do that in your homework. Okay. Now, old age dependency, it's all about the wording. Old age, we're talking about old people. Well, the old people are 65 and above. We call these the oldies. But because it's a dependency ratio, you are still comparing to the working class. Any dependency ratio compares to the workers, and the workers are always 15 to 64. No matter how you think about this, the workers are always 15 to 64. Now, if you're just talking about straight age dependency, that's anybody who is dependent on someone else. So that's your children, and that's a plus sign, and your oldies compared to your workers. So we take the age groups 0 to 14, we add to it the 65 and above, but we're still comparing it to, whoops, I already put workers, the 15 to 64-year-olds. Okay, now you'll notice the denominator for all of these is the working class, 15 to 64. That's not everybody. So an age dependency ratio is always going to be part to part because your denominator is part of the population, if that makes sense. Okay? Questions about just basic what it is, what that ratio represents, because you do need to be able to come up with, if I say old age dependency ratio, you need to know that's old people divided by workers. That you do have to be able to come up with. And that's why this first example, I just like to talk, or this first slide, the basic breakdown of the fractions so that we can then apply it on the next page. Okay. All right, so page 2. And if I'm ever going too fast or I'm going too slow, either one, you just need to tell me, speed up, can you re-talk that, whatever. That's, I just kind of go at whatever pace I feel like, and you guys need to slow me down or speed me up, depending on what you need. All right, so in this example, we are going to find all 3 of the ratios, and I have the information given here. Smaller numbers just for basic issues here. In your homework, you're going to have larger table of numbers. I don't know if any of you have looked at it, but you might have to actually do some adding. So here, the age groups are broken down for you. So we already know the total from 0 to 14 is 400, whereas in your homework, you're going to, and in your packet, if you look at it, you have to actually add up some smaller age groups together, like maybe 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 14, that kind of thing, to get the totals. But because we only have an hour and I have to do a lot in an hour, I make things a little bit easier for us. So, okay, child dependency. Again, so remember, that's 0 to 14-year-olds divided by the working class, 15 to 64. So how many children do we have in this particular example? 400, thank you. So I've got 400 children, and I'm going to divide that by how many workers? 850. Excellent. Okay, so we divide that because we want to make it a decimal, right? That's part to part, so we can't write it as a percent, but we can write it as a decimal. Let's go to 3 decimal places just for fun. What is this to 3 decimal places? Amy, you're almost correct, but if you round to 3 decimal places, you got to look 1 place past. And if we look 1 place past, we're at 0.4705. That 5 will tell us to round up. So we should actually be at 471 if we're rounding, right? Just double check. At least I think that's what my calculator said. Okay. And that's like being over 1. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about, and I'm going to do it right now while I'm thinking about it. This means right now that there are 0.471 children dependent on each worker. That's what that fraction tells us. 0.471 children, because the top number is children, dependent on 1 worker. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people. So if you think about, we can move this decimal over 1 place if we move this decimal over 1 place. So that makes my numerator 4.71 over 10. So I could say there are 4.71 children dependent on every 10 workers, right? Changes things. We can move our decimal over again and make it 47.1 over 100. So there are 47 children dependent on 100 workers. And you could do this as many times as you want. Math is about equality. If you move in the numerator, you have to move it in the denominator, right? Does that make sense how I went from green to red to purple? Did I confuse anybody there? Everybody seems okay. All right, then we go to old age. Well, remember the old age is the old people over the workers. So I have 220 old people divided by my workers, which is 850. What is this to 3 decimal places? Very good. Good rounding. So 0.259. And again, that's like over 1. So we would say there are 0.259 old people dependent on every one worker. And again, you can move the decimal, the numerator, and the denominator to make an equivalent fraction. Okay. And then we get into age dependency. So this is where we take the children and then we add the old people and divide it by the working class. So I have 400 children plus 220 oldies, and I have 850 workers. Well, that gives me 620 over 850. So I end up with an age dependency ratio of 0.729. So we would say there are 729 dependents on every 1,000 workers. There I moved the decimal over 3 places, top and bottom, to make it 729 in the top, and that gives me 1,000 in the bottom. Okay. Any questions about those 3? I would recommend if watching another one of the videos, because I spend a little bit more time on those videos, because it's 15 minutes just on that one question and it really breaks it down. But that's kind of your basic overview of child dependency, old age dependency, and age dependency ratios. Okay. You 4 are doing okay? Any other questions on dependency ratios? All right. Good, good. And then the last section of the day is scientific notation, basically. So section 3's got a little bit of different things, but the big thing is scientific notation. We spend a lot of time in scientific notation in this class, working through it back and forth. So it's probably something you've done before, but it might have been a while. So scientific notation is a way to write either really large numbers or really small numbers. And so we're going to kind of just do a little bit of that, not long. We're going to be done here in 5-10 minutes. And then I'll be ready for your questions. So scientific notation, remember, starts with a number, and then we multiply by 10 times another number, or raised to a number, excuse me. The big thing is, right, the pieces to remember is that the number here must be between 1 and 10. So we always say you want one non-zero number in front of the decimal, right? And the exponent can be positive if we're dealing with big numbers, or it will be negative if we're dealing with small numbers. Now, that's when you say, well, what's big and what's small? Well, big is greater than 10. Small is less than 1. And right, 1 and 10 are kind of our outsiders, or what am I looking for? I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but there are key stakeholders, because if you look, the top first number has to be between 1 and 10. If it's smaller than 1, we have a negative exponent. If it's larger than 10, we have a positive exponent. So negative goes down, positive goes up. Again, watch some videos of mine. I talk about that a lot. All right, let's see what's next. Converting back and forth. All right, so if you think about the first one here, convert 320,000 to scientific notation. Well, remember that very first number we need must be between 1 and 10. So right now, I do not see a decimal point in my number. And so recall, if there is no decimal point in your number, it automatically comes at the end. So my decimal point is there after the last 0. Well, if I'm changing this to scientific notation, I want that decimal to fall after the first non-zero number. So I want to move it to be between the 3 and the 2, because that will give me a front number of 3.2, and that's what I want. Now, 320,000 is obviously bigger than 10, so my exponent is going to be positive. And now I need, my exponent is the number of positions between my yellow decimal point and my blue arrow. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I moved it 5 positions, so my exponent is 5. And so 320,000 in scientific notation is 3.2 times 10 to the 5th. Now, going the other direction, I have 1.75 times 10 to the fourth. Well, the exponent tells you how many positions to move your decimal. And because it's positive, that means my number's getting bigger. Well, if my number's getting bigger, that means my decimal point needs to move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I've got nothing in these, I call them humps. I got empty humps. They become zeros. So this is really 17,500 in standard form. Right, and there's kind of just the refresh. We use a lot of different numbers. We do a lot of different things. We go from words to scientific notation. Even if this is pretty easy for you, you might want to, that is it. We multiply and divide with scientific notation. So I find it odd that that's the last slide, but that is the last slide. So definitely go through and double check what's going on with that. There are some videos that you can watch. It's 2:40. I feel like I went really fast today. Before we kind of, I guess, go off of this, do any of you have any questions about anything I covered today? Or do you have any feedback that you would like to give on this class? Good. Okay. It's also possible if you're working ahead or you're kind of looking at what's coming up for the following week and you have some question, you can always email that to me ahead of time and I can incorporate your question into the live session so that it gets answered so everybody can see it. If it's a particular concept or problem in web work, we can always talk about that too. So. All right. I don't like to waste your time. I know people generally sign up for this class because they want an online class, but I like this hour time because it gives me a chance to highlight things and go over how to take an exam and all that fun stuff. And it's great for questions. So this first session, there's not a whole lot to it, so you might not have many questions, and that's fine. But remember, so the 4 of you that were here, I appreciate you being here. I would recommend as soon as we're done, going into the class and doing the discussion board, right? It'll take you 2 minutes. But the discussion board is usually about what we did in class. So it'll be fresh and you can kind of get it out of the way, get those free points taken care of. Remember, I would recommend if you haven't already done so, you need to get into web work as soon as possible, just to make sure. I have to hand put everybody in, which means I type in the username and password. That I make mistakes. It happens. So I ask that you try to get into that. If you haven't already, try to do it today. That way, if you have an issue, we can get that taken care of. I don't want you to wait until Monday when stuff is due to start. 1, you're not going to have enough time to get through it all. And 2, I might be busy and I might not be able to get back to you right away. So remember, the orientation of web work is not for a grade. Some people like to see the 100% in there. So just in case, the third answer to number 6 is yes. It does not show up. So just FYI. In case you want that. But web work 2 and 3 are for a grade. If you do get stuck or have questions, let me know. Do watch the web work video that I sent out first. Please, please, please watch that. And then you have your first quiz. So questions, comments, concerns, suggestions from anyone? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Next week we'll be in sections, like 4, 5, and 6, I think. 4, 5, 5, and 6 will be next week. If at any point in time you want to see an additional example, like maybe today I would really like to see more on scientific notation because you barely talked about it. That is a true statement. I did barely talk about it. So if you wanted to see more, all you have to do in the chat box and say, can we see another problem like that? I can come up with another example in 6 seconds and type it up and work great. So you just have to let me know if there's something that you want to talk more about. We can do that. So, okay, so at this point, are there any more questions? Anybody need anything else from me? If not, I'm done with my portion of this. So if you don't have any questions for me, you can go ahead and sign out. If you do have questions, I'll stick around until everybody's gone. So you can ask them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and talk either way. But thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And let me know via email, call, whatever, how I can help you. And that'll be great. So thanks for a great first day.